Chapter 17. Away. At 3:20, Spoon took his pillowcase pack, left the school by the back door, and started up Pibb Street. He went fast, and the lights had gone out for a few minutes just before 3. He was nervous about being outside. He planned to take the long way to the pipe works out at the very edge of the city to avoid any guards that might still be looking for him. He was filled with dread about Lima. He wouldn't know what had happened to her until he got to the pipe works, and she either showed up or didn't. All he could do now was run. He raced down Knack Street. It was strange to be out in the city with the streets so utterly deserted. Without the people passing by and back and forth, the street seemed wider and darker. Nothing moved but himself, his shadows, his fleeting reflections in shop windows he passed. In Sleverton Square, he saw a kiosk where the poster was his and Lima's name on it had been posted up. Everyone in the city must have seen these posters by now. He was famous, he thought wearily, but not in the way he wanted. There would be no glorious moment on the Gathering Hall steps after all. Instead of making his father proud, he would cause him dreadful worry. This thought made him so sad that his knees felt suddenly wobbly. How could he just vanish without a word? But it was too late now. He couldn't go back. If only there was some way to send him a message, and in a moment he realized there was. He stopped and fished in his pack for the paper and pencil he had brought. He scribbled on it, "Father, we have found the way out. It was in the pipeworks after all. You'll know about it tomorrow. Love, Spoon." He folded this in his quarters and wrote "Delivered to Loris Harrow" in big letters on the outside and pinned it to the kiosk. There, that was the best he could do. He would have to trust that someone would deliver it. In the distance he heard the faint sound of singing. He listened. It was the song of the river just ending, far below, like the blood of earth from the center of nowhere rushing forth. He sang under his breath like everyone in Ember. He knew the words of the 3 songs by heart. He sang along softly with the faraway singers, making the light for the lamps of Ember. Older than anyone can remember, faster than anything anyone knows, the river comes and the river goes. Up Rim Street, now to River Road, he was halfway there. The singers were starting on the Song of the Darkness. It was his favorite, with its powerful, deep harmonies. He was a little sorry to be missing it. He went up to the Pot Street side of the empty River Road Square, where the poster hung crookedly on the kiosk. He headed toward North Street when suddenly the lights flickered and went out. He jolted to a stop and stood still and waited. That was his automatic response. In the distance he heard a dip in the sound of singing, some startled voices breaking the flow, and then the song rose again, defying the darkness. For a moment all thoughts vanished from Spoon's mind. There was nothing but the fearless words of the song. Black as sleep and deep as dreaming, darkness like an endless night, yet within the streets of Ember, bright and bravely shines our light. He sang, standing still in the blackness. When the song ended, he waited. The lights would surely come back soon. For a few minutes there was silence, and then far away, but piercingly clear, he heard a scream. More screams and shouts followed, and the sounds of panic. He felt the panic himself, like a hand taking hold of him, making him want to leap up and fling himself against the dark. But suddenly, with a flash of joy, he remembered. He didn't have to wait for the lights to come back on. He had what no citizen of Ember had ever had before, a way to see in the dark. He sat his pack down and untied the knot at the top. He groped around until he felt the candle. Down in a corner he found the little packet of matches. He scraped a match against the pavement and flared up instantly. He held the flame to the string on the candle, and the string began to burn. He had a light. He had the only light in the entire city. The candle didn't cast its light very far, but it was enough to see the pavement in front of him. He went slowly along Pot Street, then turned left on North Street. At the end of the street was the wall of the Pipeworks offices. When he got to the Pipeworks entrance, no one was there. A little cloud of moths came to flutter around his candle, but otherwise nothing moved in Plumber Square. There was nothing to do but wait. Spoon blew the candle out, as he didn't want to use it all up in case the lights stayed off a long time. He squatted down on the pavement and set down his bundle, leaned against one of the big trash cans. He waited, listening to the distant shouts, and at last the lights blinked, and they blinked again, and then they came on. Lima was nowhere in sight. If the guards had found her and taken her, But Spoon preferred not to think about that yet. He would wait for a while. She would have been delayed by the blackout. If she was on her way, he couldn't see the clock tower from here, but it was probably not quite 4 o'clock. What if she didn't come? The singing was over, and the people were dispersing throughout the city. The guards, no doubt, would soon resume their search for him. Spoon clasped his arms together and pressed them hard against his stomach, trying to stop the queasy fluttering. If she didn't come, Spoon had two choices: stay in the city and do what he could to save Lima, or he could go in the boat by himself and hope Lima could somehow free herself and tell the people of Ember about the way out. He didn't like either of those plans. He wanted to go down to the river, and he wanted to go with Lima. Spoon stood up and hoisted his sack again. He was too restless to keep sitting. He walked down to Gippery Street and looked in both directions. Not a single person was in sight. He walked to Plummer Street, thinking that perhaps Lima was coming by the way of the city's edge, as he had to avoid being seen. But no one was there. He didn't even see anyone when he went past Subling Street to the very end of the city. He had to decide what to do. He went and stood in the doorway of the pipeworks. Think, he said to himself, think. He was not even sure he could make the river journey by himself. How would he get the boat into the water? Could he lift it without help? On the other hand, how could he help Lima if she was in the hands of the mayor's guards? What could he possibly do that would not just get himself caught too? He felt sick. His hands were cold. He stepped out of the doorstep and scanned the square once again. Nothing moved but the moths around the lights. Then came Gappery Street. Lima came running. She came slantwise across the square, and he dashed to meet her. She was hugging a bundle to her chest. "I've come. I'm here. I almost didn't make it," she said, breathing so hard she could barely talk. "And look," she folded back the blanket of her bundle. Spoon saw a curl of brown hair and two wide, frightened eyes. "I brought Poppy." Spoon was so glad to see Lima that he didn't mind at all that Poppy was coming with them, making a risky journey even riskier. Relief and excitement flooded through him. They were going! They were going! "Okay," he said, "come on." With his borrowed key, he opened the pipeworks door, and they hurried past the yellow slickers on their hooks and the lines of rubber boots. Spoon dashed into the pipeworks office long enough to replace the key on its hook, and then they pulled open the stairway door and started down. Lima stepped slowly because of Poppy, and Poppy clung to her neck. Unusually quiet, sensing the strangeness and importance of what was happening. At the bottom of the stairs, they came out into the main tunnel and walked down the path to the west until they came to the marked rock. "How are we going to get Poppy down there?" Spoon asked. Lima said, "I'll fasten her to my chest." Setting Poppy down, Lima took off her coat and the sweater she was wearing. With Spoon's help, she made her sweater into a sling for Poppy, tying its sleeves behind her neck. She put her coat back on and buttoned it up. Spoon looked doubtfully at this bulky arrangement. "Will you be able to climb down carrying her like that? Will you be able to reach around her and hold on to the rungs?" "Yes," said Lima. Now that she had Poppy with her, she felt brave again. She could do whatever she needed to. Spoon went down first, then Lima followed. "Stay very still, Poppy," she said. "Don't squirm." Poppy did stay still, but even so it was not easy going down a ladder with her extra weight. Lima's arms were just as long enough to reach past Poppy and hold on to the ladder. She descended very slowly. When she got to the ledge, she stepped sideways, gripping the hand that Spoon held out for her. With a deep sigh of relief, she came into the entryway. They walked to the back of the entry hall, and Spoon opened the steel panel and took out the key. He slid aside the door to the room where the single boat was, and they went in. Spoon took his candle from his sack and lit it. Lima unwrapped Poppy and sat her down at the back of the room. "Don't move from there," she said. Poppy put her thumb in her mouth, and Spoon and Lima went to work. Spoon's sack went in the pointed end of the boat, which they decided must be in the front. They put the boxes of candles and matches in the rear of the boat. It was clear they had been designed to go there, as they fit quite snugly. The poles labeled paddles were a mystery. Lima thought they were weapons, meant for fending off hostile creatures. Spoon thought they might fit across the boat somehow to make railings to brace yourself. But he couldn't get them to work in this way. Finally, they decided just to leave the paddles in the bottom of the boat and figure out what they were for as they went along. Spoon dripped a bit of wax on the floor and stood his candle up in it, so he'd have both hands free. "Let's see if we can lift the boat," he said. With Spoon at the rear and Lime at the front, They found they could lift the boat with ease. It was amazingly light, even with the boxes and packs inside of it. They set it down again. The next step was to get it in the water somehow, and then get in it themselves. We can't just drop it in, Lima said. The river would grab it right away. That must be what the ropes are for, said Spoon. We lower it by holding onto the ropes and tie onto the ropes to keep it from moving. To what? They must have to put a peg on it or something that we can tie it to. Spoon went back to the edge of the river and got down on his knees. Leaning over, he felt with one hand along the bank below. At first there was only smooth, slippery rock. He moved his hand slowly back and forth, up and down. River water splashed against his fingers, at least something, a metal rod attached to the river wall, like the rungs of the ladder they had climbed down. I found it, he called. He got up again and went back to the boat room. Let's carry this boat out, he said. He and Lima lifted it and, taking small steps, moved it forward. As they went out the door, Poppy began to wail. Don't cry, Lima called to her. Stay right there. We'll be back in a second. They carried the boat right to the edge of the water and set it down carefully. At the front end, pointing downstream, Spoon knelt down again, feeling for the metal rod. Hand me the end of the rope, he said. Which rope? Lima thought for a second. She realized it had to be the one attached to the side of the boat nearest to her. That would be the side closest to the riverbank. When they put the boat in, she uncoiled the rope and ran it around the boat, and handed its end down to Spoon, who lay on his stomach with his head hanging over the edge, and knotted the rope to the metal rung in the wall. He got to his feet again, wiping water from his face. Now, Spoon said, we can put the boat in the water. Another wail came from the boat room. I'm coming, Lima called, and dashed back for Poppy. She hoisted her up and spoke into her ear in the voice she used for announcing an excited game. We're going on an adventure, Poppy. We're going for a ride. A ride in the water. It'll be fun, sweetie, you'll see. She blew out the candle Spoon had left and carried Poppy to the river's edge. Are we ready? Said Spoon. I guess we are. Goodbye to Ember, Lima thought. Goodbye to everyone. Goodbye to everything. For a second, a picture of herself arriving in the bright city of her dreams flashed in her mind, and then it faded and was gone. She had no idea what lay ahead, and set Poppy down against the wall of the entry passage. Sit here, she told her. Don't move until I tell you to. Poppy sat, her eyes wide, her plump legs sticking out in front of her. Lima took hold of the rope at the rear of the boat. Spoon took hold of the rope at the front. They heaved the boat and stretched sideways to swing it over the water. It tipped alarmingly from side to side. Let it down, yelled Lima. They both let the rope slide through their hands, and the boat fell and hit the water with a slap. It bounced and rocked and pulled against its tether, but Spoon's knot held. The boat stayed in place, waiting for them. Here I go, Spoon cried. He bent over and gripped the rim of the boat with one hand. He turned backward and stepped in. The boat tipped sideways under his weight, and Spoon staggered a step and then found his balance. All right, he yelled, hand me Poppy. Lime lifted Poppy, who began to howl and kick at the sight of the bucking boat and the churning water. But Spoon's arms were right there, and Lima thrust her into them. A second later, she jumped into the boat, and then all three of them were tossed to the floor of the boat by its violent rocking. Spoon managed to get to his feet, and he hauled on the rope, and that held the boat to the bank until he was close enough to reach the knot. He struggled with it, water splashing into his face. He yanked at the knot, loosened it, pulled the rope free, and the boat was shot forward.